Hi, my name is Lindsay Gothrop, and this is my Egypt at a Glance podcast. I am currently a freshman at Michigan State University. This podcast is for my individual research project in my IAH 205 Africa and the World class. Here today we will explore the misconceptions of Egypt's geography and culture and how it is perceived around the world. This topic is important to me because Egypt has always been a very interesting place to me and a place that I've always wanted to visit, so doing research about it only seems fitting. I'm particularly interested in the geography and culture of Egypt and how those two connect. The structure of this podcast will be as follows: a discussion about how Egypt's geography and culture is perceived around the world and why that is important, then followed by a wrap-up of what I have learned throughout the project and what challenges I have faced. I hope you enjoy and learn from my podcast. Okay, so to start off, Egypt is an important country for many reasons. The River Nile starts in Egypt, which provides the country with most of its agricultural output. Egypt also controls the Suez Canal, which transports a lot of trade between Europe, Asia, and Africa. It also holds 2 of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, which attracts thousands of tourists each year. Despite these qualities that make Egypt great, it is often not seen as a part of Africa. Iman Emrani wrote an article for The Guardian titled, Why don't we think of North Africa as a part of Africa? She writes about herself coming from Albania, but not feeling like a part of Africa because she does not have the same skin color as the majority of Africans. For Egyptians, this stereotype can also be felt. In this piece, I am going to study the geography and culture of Egypt and how that contributes to their status in Africa and other places around the world, particularly the Middle East. So, the geography of Egypt is very unique in that they have the River Nile traveling right through the country, and that provides many resources like water and vegetation, and transportation and trade, and many of their largest cities are right off the banks of the River Nile. The rest of the country, however, is mainly an arid desert climate. Egypt is also surrounded by water on 2 sides, with the Mediterranean Sea to their north and the Red Sea to their east. These make trade much easier with Europe and Asia. The Suez Canal, which Egypt controls, is also a large trade route that provides transport from the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, which eventually turns into the Indian Ocean. These trade routes provide Egypt with the imports and exports needed to stimulate their economy. Since Egypt has close to 2,000 miles of coastline and the Sinai Peninsula connects Africa and Asia, their relationship with other countries such as Saudi Arabia and Libya is civil. Cairo, Egypt houses the central office for the Arab League, which is a regional organization that has 22 members from Western Asia and Africa. This organization's main goal is to strengthen the ties between countries and to protect their independence and sovereignty. The point to be made here is that since Egypt houses the Arab League, their connection with other countries is very great, and these countries see Egypt for the country that they are. The problem is that all of these countries are in Africa or Western Asia. So countries like the United States or countries in Europe don't see Egypt as a part of Africa due to the fact that they have such a close relationship with countries in the Middle East. This is a problem because Egypt is a part of Africa and is a contributing member to their continent as a whole, and they should be seen as a part of Africa. This harms the people in Egypt if they're not seen as part of Africa, because then they might not have a sense of belonging, even though they do know where they're from and what country they're from, but they don't have a sense of community with the rest of the countries in Africa. Egypt's geography is important because although it is a part of Africa, it is so close to other parts of the world, like the Middle East. This makes the relationship with these countries, as stated before, very strong. Next, I would like to discuss how Egypt's culture compares and relates to other countries in Africa and countries in the Middle East. In the United States, our education system has limited us. While taking history throughout high school, we mostly learn about ancient civilizations, then World War I and World War II, and that's about it. When we learn about ancient Egypt, we learn about the pyramids of Giza and Cleopatra and mummies. Apparently, they don't care to mention the rest of Africa during these ancient times, and they also don't care to mention that Egypt existed past the 5th century of time. I understand that you can't learn about everything since civilization started, but Egypt, and more importantly Africa, are underrepresented and not learned about enough in our history classes. This makes it hard to want to learn about Africa later in life. A major misconception about Egypt is that even though it is considered a part of the Middle East, it is seen as separate from the rest of the Middle Eastern countries because it is in Africa. Since the rest of the Middle Eastern countries lie within Asia, Egypt isn't seen as part of the Middle East by the rest of the world. I honestly didn't even know that Egypt was a part of the Middle East before starting this research project. The problem with this is that Egypt's culture is much more similar to the cultures of Middle Eastern countries. In the Middle East, religion is very important, and no matter where you are in the Middle East, it can be observed. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam were all birthed in the Middle East, and all of these religions are still practiced there today. Since the Middle East is in the middle of 3 continents, it has always been a very popular place for travelers, which can make conflict more abundant. Egypt fits in the Middle East as a trade route, but also as a strong country. Its national language is Arabic, and although it's geographically in the continent of Africa, its cultural beliefs and values align strongly with the Middle East or Western Asia. The misconception that Egypt isn't a part of the Middle East because of its geography, and the misconception that Egypt isn't a part of Africa because of its culture is why I did this podcast. Egypt isn't just a part of the Middle East or just a part of Africa. Its ties with both places run deeper than we could ever know, and this is important and amazing to me. As we learned in class, Africa is a misunderstood continent. Western culture has made it seem like Africa isn't worth studying or learning about. The truth is, each country in Africa is different and has their own culture, ideas, language, religion, etc. Just like the rest of the world, Africa is diverse and interesting, and it's sad that most people haven't taken the time to get to know the countries of Africa like they should. We can learn so much from the people of Africa, yet many aren't willing to let them have a voice. If we listened, maybe I wouldn't be doing this research project in the first place. I think as people from the United States and other countries who maybe don't accept Africans for all that they are, we need to open our minds to them and hear what they have to say. I have a feeling we could all learn a lot. This project has taught me a lot about the country of Egypt, but also about the world as a whole. Everyone has a different perception of each country, and that is something that cannot be controlled. The only thing we can do as individuals is to study and learn as much as we can so we can look at the world and other people with no biases. I am going to start to think about and research more about Africa, and let my friends, family, and peers know that they should too. We can learn so much and become better people with more experiences. And I think opening up to the experience that is to learn about Africa and its people would make us so much stronger. This project was also challenging in that I started off making a website and then changed my idea to make a podcast instead, because I thought my ideas would be better represented through a voice instead of words on a page. The circumstances we are all going through right now have definitely made this project more difficult, but I'm glad we were still able to complete it and to learn from this experience. I hope you learned something new about Egypt and the perspectives about the world through this podcast. Stay home and stay safe.